Okay, welcome class. This is the January getting started, and our project today is the Canoe model. I am Mary Fugier with Robert McNeel and Associates in Seattle, and I'm a tech and a trainer. So let's take a look at where this might have all started for you. So this is the Rhino website, and you may have downloaded the 90-day eval, or you may have Rhino at your employment. But this is the main website where we try to organize all the resources for Rhino, including the links to buy and download. All of that is here. So that's usually the starting point. And then if you pick on Learn, from the Learn page, there's a link to uh, do a live getting started. So the getting starteds are recorded, and we keep them. We keep them in a folder, so you can do the one from December or November or September last year as well. But this is what you signed up for. In 2 hours, you will learn to build a model from scratch, learn techniques, tips and tricks, and a discussion about kind of the basic Rhino UI. And it will be recorded and posted to the Rhino 8 for Windows, to this website. And like I said, you can get to, in this album, all the getting starteds that we've done for Rhino 8 for about 14 months now. We are going to be using Windows, so we have a separate getting started for Rhino for Mac. So you can see here over the past decade or more, mostly Kyle Hutchins and I have been presenting the getting starteds, and they've all been organized in albums. It's not, you could certainly go back and do one from Rhino 7 or Rhino 6. It's difficult if you have Rhino 6 to do some of the getting starteds that we've presented with Rhino 8 because they use some of the new features like push-pull, which is only in Rhino 8. But there's a lot of good resources there. You can also get to this album here off the Learn page if you pick on the wine organizer here. I did that, I think, back with Rhino 7. You will get to the same album. Now, we're also going to do a follow-up email. You'll get a link to this album, and I will send it here in the chat. So just so you know, we poked the record button if you're just joining us, and the video will be posted here as soon as possible. So usually we say within a day, but we usually get it out there quicker. So since we're going to be doing a project in Rhino, hopefully you will be set up something like this, where you have Rhino here and you have go to training or the video over here. And as you're watching, you'll be able to do, at least in this live presentation, do as much as you can. But when you get the video, you can start and stop and start and stop as you wish. But obviously, in a live presentation, we won't be able to do that. So just my hope here and my goal for you is to be picking buttons, and whether you get exactly what I have on the screen doesn't matter, long as you are going through kind of the motions. And then when the video is posted, you can go through step by step at your own pace, and you can produce the model exactly how we're doing here. So I always use this little picture, helps me out. If you don't have two monitors for the live presentation, it might help as you're doing Rhino tutorials and videos to have two monitors. And that way you can dedicate one screen to Rhino and one screen to the video. At least that helps me. Okay, so let's pull that out of the way. And as I said, this is our project today. If I go to the perspective view, you can see the model that we're going to be generating. The hull of the boat is actually a closed poly surface. And there's some advantage that we get from having a closed poly surface. We can go up to analyze mass property and volume, and we can get the volume in the current units, or if you take the volume command, and you can type these in, we'll see that here in a moment, you can pick the units that you'd rather have the volume calculated in. But we'll get into that. I just wanted you to see that this is a model, and the model is going to be shown in the different views on the page or the sheets that are going to go to the printer or the plotter. So if I double click, okay, we have a question about the recording. If you don't see the link that I've posted here, I'll post it again. That's it. And you're going to get an email about where the album is. So all of you can chat with each other. So if you want to help me out here, since I'm flying solo, if you paste this link, if anyone else asks the question, I would really appreciate it. Okay, so you can see here that the dimensions are created in the model space, but we're going to be able to show them on the layout sheet or not. And as you see in this page here, which is just the large rendered view, it's not showing dimensions. But if I go to page 2, each of the details is showing the dimensions. And if I go to page 3, this is our new section tool in Rhino 8. It's showing the views section. So as if we cut the piece in half, and then we added a section style with a little bit of hatching here and a thick border. So all of that is coming to us from the Rhino sections. So those sections are either clipping planes or actual sections. How they're created is different, but in the end, they have the same functionality. So that's what we're going to be creating today and configuring pretty much from scratch. Now, I do have some curves already created that are going to help us get half the hull, but the other half of the hull and bringing this together into a solid, adding the bumper, adding the Rhino logo, all of that you're going to do. Now, if you scroll up in your chats and you look back at your materials in Go to Training, I did ask that you downloaded some files and have them ready to open. Now, I'm going to go through some basic information probably for about 15-20 minutes, so you have plenty of time to download these files. And I just shared the link again. So if we look at the folder that I have here, I have one called 2025 Getting Started, and I made a folder called the Canoe, and I unzipped this file. I have a Canoe start that will all be opening up after we complete the introductory information. We also, in that zip, have a Rhino logo that we'll be bringing in and orienting on the surface of the hull, and we have a title block. So we have all those ready for you to download and unzip into a folder. So just remember where the folder is, because when I ask you to open that Start Canoe file, you're going to have to remember where it's at and navigate Rhino to that location. Okay, so one of the great things about the layout is it does represent the 2D sheet of paper that you're going to be sending to your printer or plotter. This sheet is 36 by 24, and we call that a D-size sheet here in the US, architectural D-size. So that this is designed at full size to go to a printer or plotter. But we can still print it scaled to a smaller size printer. So just because you've configured your layouts for a large sheet size doesn't mean that's the only way that you can output them. And if you output to PDF, you can scale from that PDF at the time you print. So there's lots of ways to work with this. But I just wanted to show you that when I double click into this detail is a window into the model. And the window has control over which layers that are going to be visible in this view or not. So each detail has its own level of visibility. So if you didn't like the view that I had here, you can zoom it around and pick another view. Now the perspective view is not to scale, but if we go to page 2 and we look on properties, we can see that this detail is at 1 to 12. That means in every 1 inch on the paper, there are 12 model units. So in every 1 inch here on that paper, we have 12 model units. Now, this could be 1 to 100, 1 to 50, 1 to 48. You get to decide that based on the size of the model. If we were doing a full architectural building, then you would probably find that the scale that you would be using would be more like 1 to 96, which is 1/8 inch equals a foot imperial, or 1 to 100, or even like 1 to 200 if it's a very large building. So this unit depends on the size of the model that you're putting together. It may also be possible for you to be doing a model full size, 1 to 1. So if you're doing a product design, you might have a scale of 1 to 1. So all of this depends on your model. Now notice that I post the scale here, and the scale is actually a text field that is tied to this detail. So I didn't just type in 1 inch equals a foot or 1 to 12. That is coming off of the detail. Now the detail is a window into the model, and these details are showing the top, front, and right view. And we have a perspective view that isn't showing the dimensions and isn't to scale also on this sheet. Okay, so that's what we have ahead of us. Let's take a look at some of the parts of the screen that we are going to be referring to. The first part up here is the menu bar. And you can take most of your commands from the menu bar, and they are organized in the hierarchy of Rhino geometry. So we have curves, and curves are used many times as input for surfaces. And when surfaces are joined together into a closed volume, you have a solid. So right up here on the menu, we start to see the hierarchy of Rhino geometry. We also see that Rhino has drafting features and transformation commands like scale, mirror, rotate, align, flow along surface, flow along curve. These are those commands that are going to take your geometry and morph them into different shapes, different arrays. And you can see here that this hull surface is curved, but the Rhino text is morphed to flow along that surface. And that's because of the flow along surface command. And same with this Rhino logo. The Rhino logo was designed planar on the XY construction plane. And then we picked up the Rhino logo and it along that surface. You can imagine how much more complicated this would be if you had to design on this curved surface. Okay, so Rhino allows you to design flat and then take that geometry and flow it along a surface. And you can see how much of a time saver that is. Jewelers were particularly impressed with the flow commands, and that's because of the simplicity of designing in 2D and then allowing Rhino to take that 2D or 3D geometry and flow it along the surface of a ring and do the deformation of that geometry. Okay, the other menu items are probably very familiar, file and edit due to other commands, but you can just, roll your cursor across here and get familiar with what are in these menus. So one of the options you have for starting a command like polyline is to take it from the curve menu. Escape is cancel. The other option you have is to go to the command line and type. And as you're typing your command, Rhino auto-completes and shows you all of the commands that include what you're typing. And in this case, it was poly. So as I typed in poly, I got all the commands that either have poly in them or fit the fuzzy algorithm down here to include poly somewhere in the command. Okay. So if you wanted to start polyline, you could pick it from here. And most commands have options. We call these command line options, and you can pick on the command line to use that option. Okay? So when we start a command and we say select the option, what we're referring to up here is the command line and picking the option. Now, these are all scriptable, and by looking at the camel case, which letter is capitalized, you could also type in P for persistent to toggle that option. The other way that you have to get to your commands is through the toolbar. Now, the one other thing I want to point out here is that let's say that you get to class late and all of a sudden I'm talking about Loft and you have no idea where the Loft command is. I want to skip over here to our panels, and there is a help panel, and that help panel, when you pick on it, will actually tell you where the command is located and give you details about that command. Now, one thing I did before class is I used a Rhino 8 command called reset. And reset allowed me to do a factory reset on my Rhino so that everything was put back to the way Rhino was the first time that I opened it. And that's helpful for you because if you're looking at my screen and I've moved the toolbars around and I have lots of panels open, then that's not very helpful to you. So if you're a little frustrated right now that maybe your screen doesn't look like my screen because you've been working on the Rhino eval for about 6 weeks and nothing looks the same, you can restore Rhino to its factory defaults. Now, this will get rid of everything custom that you have done. So that's just a warning, but you can kind of surgically pick on maybe resetting the window layout or resetting the toolbars. But that's a very important command if all of a sudden now your screen doesn't look like my screen, you can't get to the help, or you don't know how yet to get to the help or get back to the help tab. Okay, so watch what happens when I type in Loft. Loft comes up on the help panel and I can get help for all the options that help offers, including where to find the Loft command and maybe more importantly, what that button looks like. Okay, so if I were looking for Loft, I can go here to my panels and I can pick on the surface tools. And from surface tools on the right over here, I can see the Loft command right here. And then I can look at all the surface editing commands above. So when it comes to the tabbed toolbars, not every toolbar changes the sidebar. And this area over here is called the sidebar. Not every command changes the sidebar, but you will see that surface tools and solid tools and some of the others do. So if you go back to the standard toolbar, then you will be back to your standard toolbar sidebar. Okay, so just be aware of that. This is a really important tool when you're learning Rhino. Eventually, you will move away from it, and maybe it will still be open, but you will be on one of these other tabs. But it's still here to offer you help on any new command that you may be trying to learn and test out. The sidebar in Rhino has a new option in Rhino 8, and it's a button that will collapse and show the sidebar. So if you pick on this button, it will reclaim that area of the screen and basically just close up the sidebar. And then you can pick on it again and get your sidebar back. So if you are trying to work on Rhino or do a presentation with Rhino showing the model, you might not need to show if you're not going to be doing any modeling or editing. And this is an interesting feature because it was first in Rhino for Mac, and it was in Rhino 5, 6, and 7 for Mac, and finally we got enough requests from Windows users that they wanted it too, that we added it in Rhino for Windows. So this is brand new to Rhino for Windows, which brings up another important point. And I answer this question a lot, and it has to do with what you are actually buying. And the license of Rhino that you are buying is a dual license platform. So when you buy Rhino, you're not committing to Rhino for Windows or Rhino for Mac. In fact, you can run it both places if you validate Rhino using the Cloud Zoo. So I can have Rhino on multiple computers, and using my Rhino account, and my Cloud Zoo is kind of our affectionate name for it, you can open Rhino on any computer. So your Cloud Zoo licensing is going to allow you to run Rhino on Windows or on Mac or on both. So if you need Rhino for Mac, you can download it from here. Make sure and use the second bulleted item because you don't need an eval key. And if you already have one or if you own Rhino, use this second option. And if you're looking for your eval key and you pick on, let's say, Rhino 8 for Windows, it will show you it on the next screen. And so what I do for that is I go to here, and let's see if I go to download for Windows. Anyway, I know another way to get to it that used to work, but you'll have to take the survey now, and that's kind of miserable. I hate taking surveys. You get so many, right? You get them in your email, you get them when you're downloading. It's just kind of, at this point in the game for me, it's very annoying. But if you go here to license management options, this is where you can find out your Rhino eval key. Okay, so if you don't remember what it was, you lost the email, you can also get to it from your Rhino account. So there's a couple ways to get back at that. But if it is in your Rhino account, then you don't need to worry about that. And if it isn't in your Rhino account, you can move it to your Rhino account in options. So if you go to the yellow gear or go to tools and options and you go to licensing, you can modify your license with change your license key, and you can move it to the Cloud Zoo. So mine's already in the Cloud Zoo, so my options will be different. But if you did lock it to a computer and you want the convenience of being able to add it to the Cloud Zoo, you can move it there just by following through the prompts. Now, the next area of the screen I want to draw your attention to is the status bar. And the status bar is going to show you which modeling aids you're using. Like ortho, it's going to tell you what layer is current. If you pick on an object, it's going to tell you what layer that object is on. It'll give you some quick readout about where your cursor is in absolute coordinates. And I'm going to turn off Smart Track. I don't know, I shouldn't have it on, but maybe I picked it by mistake. There's also the Gumball, which is your best friend in Rhino. We're going to be talking about that here next. And there are some optional info that you can display here. If you right click over the last square here, somebody asked me for this the other day. They wanted to know how many objects they had selected. So I can turn that on and it will roll through how many objects I have selected, as well as how much physical RAM I'm using. So anyway, there's some other things on there. Obviously, we couldn't let this go on to infinity, but we were able to provide options that you could choose from by right-clicking on the last square. And like the left side of the screen, You also have a collapse button to collapse the sidebar. So again, if you want to maximize your screen so you could show someone your Rhino model, you can collapse the panels. The panels are super powerful because, like the tabbed toolbars, they let you see multiple panels at the same time, but only one can be current. So the one that we have going here, of course, is help, but you can pick up under layers. And layers are how you organize your model. Some programs call them levels, but Rhino has a unique option called a hierarchical layer. And that hierarchical layer allows layers to be children of a parent layer. And you can also have grandchildren layers. So the great thing about a hierarchical layer system is that if you turn off the parent, then all of the children layers go off with that parent. It's also a great way to see how the model is organized from the 2D aspects to the 3D aspects. And sometimes the 2D curves would be in their own layer configuration. Now you can drag out it gets a little jumpy with the go-to training, but I could usually get to it. You can drag out the size of your your layer names. We also have a lot of other features that are tied to the layer other than visibility. We have lock, we have color, material, line type, print color, print width. Let's see if I can keep this over here. We also have section style. We have viewport layer visibility for a new viewport. We have model visibility, which is brand new in Rhino 8, so I can change the model visibility without affecting the layouts. And some people call this safe layout. So I can be in the model here and I can turn off the dimension layer only, but if it's current, I can't do that. So I'd have to make another layer current, and I can turn it off, the dimensions, without affecting the layouts. Now, I also turned on something that I call the bounding box, and I need to make some other layer current here so I can turn this guy off, probably globally, because I don't want to see that anywhere. The global on off is like your big power switch on the outside of your house or building. So once you pull that, nothing on that layer is visible anywhere. Whereas this visibility for dimensions, the model visibility, means that I'm only turning it off in the I'm only turning it off in the model view. And so I'm over here back to the model view, which is why I didn't see the option I was looking for. You can see it's off there. It's way over here. So there's probably some of these I want to turn off. I could turn it back on in the model or turn it off. Anyway, just another new Rhino 8 feature that we're really excited to tell you about. So if I right click here over the panel, I can turn some of these options off. And if I turn them off, they're not going to be visible if I don't use them a lot. I actually have people tell me they don't print. So if you don't print and you want to turn off print color and print width, you can do that. But I'm going to keep them all on for now. So there's one important panel that I want to show you. If you right click over any of these panels, there is one called tutorials. So go ahead and put the check mark in tutorials. Another question that I get a lot from Rhino 7 users has to do with the vertical configuration of the panels. And if you don't like that, if you'd rather go back to horizontal, you can pick on the gear and go back to horizontal. So when you do that, you can see them now all across the top. I think the decision here is that you could see more vertically. So they were changed in Rhino 8 to display vertically. I'm just going to, if I'm remembering right, that was what I heard. The tutorials that Rhino has, the official training guides as well as the user guide, is in the tutorial panel. So that means that after this class, I would recommend that you first do the user guide tutorials, and then you can jump into other tutorials like the level 1. And of course, when you're more advanced, we have the level 2. Okay, so they're all here for you to use inside of Rhino. So if I go to the user guide and I pick on the user guide for Windows, it brings up the user guide for Windows in my reader, and I can go here to view. I use Foxit, and Foxit lets you choose the multiple screen. There we go. So we can see them side by side, just as if we printed the pages out. And if you go, you can go through all of these tutorials. And when the tutorial asks you to open a model, then you can do that by just picking them from that list. So if I go here and it says to open the tutorial model EdgeSurf, okay? So Eric asks, where did I get? I got it from right inside Rhino, Eric, and it's on the under user guide for Windows, okay? So if I rerun for you, you can right click on any panel, turn on the tutorials panel. It's the one with the graduation cap, right? It's going to make you smarter. The mortar board, as we call it. And once that opens, similar to what we saw with layer, there are these hierarchical groupings. And under user guide, you have files to open, which I was just talking about, or you have the user guide PDF, okay? And you'll double click on that and it will open in whatever you have designated as your PDF reader. Now I use Foxit, so it opened up for me in Foxit. And what I was showing you is in this tutorial, it tells us to open EdgeSurf. So what do I do here? I go back to Rhino and I double click on EdgeSurf. And when I double click on EdgeSurf, it wants to open them. You put your cursor over any panel and right click. And then you get a pop-up dialog box where you can open up different panels. Okay, did that work for you, Michael? You can also pick on the gear up here and pick on the button that says Show Panels. That will also get you to the same pop-up dialog and scroll down to the bottom and open up tutorials. And there'll be other panels that we open here as well as we move through the model. Okay, did that work for you? Okay, let me know when you have a chance. And then from there, go to User Guide and double click on User Guide for Windows. Okay? Well, we'll have to handle that after class, Michael. I don't know why it's not working, but I have time after the session, or you can email me because I will probably have to take, maybe do a remote onto your computer. Sometimes it has to do with different resolutions. If you have two monitors, make sure you get the latest Rhino. So check for updates and we'll figure it out, but it's going to take some investigation for that. Okay, so what I wanted to show you here is when the user guide calls for you to open a file, all you have to do is double click on it and it opens in Rhino. So now we're ready to do this tutorial on EdgeSurf using the PDF file and the file that we opened. And that goes on forever inside of these tutorials and the training guide. So like I said, it's really helpful to have two screens here when you're going through these tutorials. I'm going to go to level 1, and from the level 1, let's double click on the level 1 training guide. And I want to show you something. You do not need this for the training. I'm just showing you where the model is that we're going to be doing in this class. If I go to the training guide, level 1 training guide, and I search on Loft, we're doing the exercise here for on the Loft command. So Loft will bring us to the, let's see if we can find it under Canoe. There we go. Okay, so the getting started exercise that we're going to be doing today is in the training guide. So you can refer to that as well as the video after class. It is in, let me drag that over here. It is in, I just want to make this a little bit bigger because I couldn't read it on the smaller screen. It is on page 221 and it is in chapter 11, exercise 3. So chapter 11, exercise 3, the canoe is what we are doing. Now you don't need this. You'll follow along with me, but it's a good resource for after the class. Okay, so let's go ahead, and now that we're here in the level 1 folder, let's open up a file called What is Rhino? And another thing, Michael, you might want to try is to type in the command tutorials, and that will open up this tutorial panel. So if the right click isn't working, hopefully tutorials will work to open that up. Also, make sure you have your slider bar here open so that the tutorials can show. So all of these have commands that are used to open them. And you also could try the reset command, might get you back. This file Unfortunately, I haven't uploaded, so you can just if you can't get to this file because you can't get to the panels, well, we're only going to be in it very shortly, and then we're going into another file. So um, let me know if you're still not able to get to the panel because it is really important. Okay, Michael, good. Update, reopen. Hopefully that will do it. Use that reset command and then also type in tutorials. Okay, is there anybody else not able to access the tutorials panel? It would be helpful while I take a sip of coffee here to find that out. Okay, great. Okay, so what is Rhino? This is a file that will show you all of the objects that you can anticipate on seeing when you go into Rhino. The first one here is a curve, a hatch pattern, dimensions, and then you have curves, which are 2D objects. Some are on the construction plane, others are off the construction plane. They're used as input for surfaces, so that potato chip type surface that you see here was created similar to what we're going to do when we do the canoe with a loft between those curves. We also have light objects like spotlights and point lights and parallel lights that are going to help you do custom lighting of your model. We also have a picture frame object, which is any image that you want to paste into Rhino. There's also a picture command, but remember, if I go over here, you can grab any image if you want to try this. But if I grab this image of the Dell guy, I can bring him onto my Rhino model. Now, this is just by pasting Control V, or I could use the paste from clipboard command. So the picture is a special surface, and we can rotate it with either the gumball, or we can rotate it with the rotate command. And let's just go to the right view, and I'll pick it up here and rotate it this way. Now, I can make that very simple if I have the gumball turned on. We're going to be getting into the gumball here next. Rhino also have points. It just marks a location in space. There is a point command, and if you right click on the point command, you can create multiple points. There are commands that work with points, and for example, if you go up here to curve and down to polyline through points, you can select the points either one by one, or in Rhino. Oh, excellent. Thank you for the feedback, Michael. I really appreciate that. Okay. So you can open up the file now called What is Rhino? And you'll be able to get to the next couple files. Great. Okay, let's pick a window around those points. So if I pick out in the open and drag a window to the right, I get only the points that are completely enclosed. If I pull a window to the left, I get a window around objects that are crossed or enclosed. And escape will remove the selection. So if I pick those points and go up to curve and down to polyline and down to through points. Notice I have a degree here, those command line options that we were talking about. If I set the degree to 3, look what happens. Instead of a polyline, we get a NURBS curve through those points, which brings up another topic as you're starting to learn Rhino and getting more proficient with it. A curve has a degree and a number of points and a parameterization. So if I pick on this polyline and I go up here to edit and rebuild, it tells me that I have a degree 1 curve. Now, the other option I have is to go to properties and details, and it will tell me I have a valid closed curve with 12 points, and it's a degree 1 curve. So lines and polylines are degree 1. Circles and arcs and ellipses and elliptical arcs, those are degree 2. And our freeform curves, our control points and interpolated points curves, are degree 3. And that is why when we went to create a polyline through points, instead of just creating the lower degree curves, the polyline through points asked me which one I wanted. So the more flexible the curve, the higher degree. And we'll mostly use degree 3 through degree 5. You have to have a reason to go higher than that. You maybe would go to degree 7 if you had a reason, but you don't want to if the lower degree curves are going to be able to reflect the shape of your geometry. The geometry just gets more complex and harder to model smoothly with. So there's a saying in modeling, especially Rhino, that we use: simple is better. So if you can get along with a simpler curve and still define your shape, then we are going to try to do that. Now, obviously, when it comes to a polyline, that may not be able to define the shape. So that's why up here under Edit, we can rebuild curves and surfaces. So what you see, and you can type this in or you can go up to Edit and Rebuild. And you can find it under Curve Tools. You can get help there from the Help panel on that one. But the point count is 13. So I'll change that to 13, and the degree is 1. So watch what happens to this curve if I change it to degree 3, but keep the point count. So it gets much more flexible, and I can use it to define a 3D shape. Okay. Now we can move the control points and change the shape of the curve after we have, now that point isn't associated with the curve. This one is. Okay, so when I change the control points on the curve, and I'm doing it now by just pulling, but we can do it later with the gumball. Okay, and these are closed extrusions or poly surfaces. You could see a little bit difference there when you pick on them. And extrusion is very efficiently stored in Rhino. So if you're doing a lot of architectural work, you might find that Rhino 8 keeps your files smaller than previous versions like Rhino 5, before Rhino 5. You might have used it maybe in school and the files were really obnoxious. But what we're storing here is a curve and a 3D vector. and that just makes the file size smaller, more efficient. It doesn't make it work any different. It's just why you're going to see extrusion and not polysurface. Now, this doesn't qualify as an extrusion, so it's stored as a B-rep or a polysurface. So that tells you that, and you can get quite a bit of efficiency from the Gumball when you're working with this geometry. So let's go ahead and add the Gumball here into our vocabulary. So turn on the Gumball, and the Gumball is a widget that appears on objects, and the Gumball widget can be used to the basic functions first: move, copy, scale, and rotate. And there's some other ones in there that you can look into in the help file. But the basic functionality of the Gumball is to be able to go to the object and move it, copy it, scale it 1D, 2D, 3D. So take a look at what happens here if I move this curve using the Gumball. Okay, it moves it. I can also type in a number like 2. Okay, I can also move it in the Z direction. So if I pick on the blue arrow and type in 5, it moves it in above the construction plane. Okay, so you can move, and let me undo those. You can also copy. So if I drag that and tap the Alt key, I can create a copy. Drag it, tap the Alt key. Okay, you can also, what do we want to do first? How about scale? So I could scale it in one direction using the scale widgets. I can also rotate, and I can rotate on the construction plane, or I can rotate off the construction plane. Okay, and that's not just for curves, it's also for surfaces and for other geometry. So if I pick on the cube, I can rotate it around and change the orientation. I can also scale the cube independently, or if I hold the Shift key down, I can scale it equally in the X, Y, and Z direction. Can you define degree while rotating? If you turn on ortho, Eric, then you will get the restrictions of ortho. And currently it's set to 90 degrees. So you can see now I'm just rotating 90 degrees. So if you turn ortho on, you can do that. Another option with ortho, if you right click on it, you can set the ortho degree. And I prefer to set my ortho degree to 15. And that way, as I'm rotating it around, I get each step there of 15 degrees. Okay? Now, the other option you have is while you're rotating, if ortho is off, you can hold the Shift key down and temporarily get ortho. Okay? Great. There are also technical commands for move, copy, scale, rotate. So if you're finding that the number of steps it takes to do something with the Gumball, like move the origin of the Gumball and then rotate, if that's too confusing, you can go back and use these commands. So rotate. With rotate, it's really great because you can pick the object to rotate, enter, pick the center of rotation, pick the first reference point and pick copy. And now and I can hold the shift key down and I can use that little ortho temporary marker. So I can do that with the rotate command. And it you could probably get close with the Gumball, but it would be a different set of steps. So you can relocate the Gumball to here. And then as you rotate it around, hold down the Alt key. Let's rotate it around, tap the Alt key, and then you have to do it again, tap the Alt key. I mean, it's not terrible, but just so you can compare the two workflows. So just because we can rotate with Gumball doesn't mean that we don't have a rotate command. And sometimes just using the rotate or scale command can be better. And if better is less steps, maybe. You get to decide that, but you can see how you can get to both goals there equally as well. Okay, I want to show you a feature. So hopefully you'll start using the Gumball. The Gumball, if you aren't already using it, the Gumball you can use to do control point editing. Like I can raise these control points off the construction plane. So now I have, this 3D sculpting that I'm doing with this curve. Great. Just by using, now I do have points there, and that might be confusing. So I have a command called cell point, and I can type it in. Then I can just delete the points. Now it is selecting the control points, so I'm going to remove the highlighting and just delete the control points. Now when I look at my curve, it's a little bit easier to see just the points that are part of that curve. Okay, I want to talk about a feature that makes something in Rhino 7 quite laborious, and that was changing the construction plane. So I'm going to use this, and Rhino 8 has a feature that works with the Gumball called Auto C-Plane. So I not only want to show you Auto C-Plane, but I also want to make sure you know how to turn it off, because when you're not using it, it can get in the way. So make sure your Gumball is on and turn on Auto C-Plane and watch what happens here. When I pick on one of the curves that I rotated, it changes the construction plane to that curve. And there's a command in Rhino called plan, and I can look at the construction plane in the plan view, and you can see how it's skewed everything. And I can add now to this construction plane. I'm just going to do something easy here, like a circle, and I can return to the perspective view by picking on the down arrow here and selecting Set View to Perspective. And you can also return to the perspective view by pulling off this toolbar. And if you have room over here, you can dock it. Set it down first and then dock it. And I pulled it off from here. So I pressed and dragged, grabbed the bar and moved it away. And then from here, you can change your views by using these controls. And if you drag it over and drop it in the purple space, then you can very quickly change your views, and you can reset the size of this to accommodate 2 buttons. The other toolbar that can be helpful is construction planes. And the construction plane that we're used to seeing for the perspective viewport is world top. So I can pick it from there, or you can see how small this makes. I may just keep that one floating. Or you can pick it from the viewport title, set seaplane, and we can pick world top. So that might be an easier place to do it, but you can see how we can access those commands from the button as well. And this panel is going to be really helpful in showing you that. Okay, so what happens if I pick on one of the sides of this poly surface? Okay, well, first of all, I need to be able to pick on this side of the poly surface. And right now, if I pick on it, it's one object. Okay, so I'm going to copy it, and I want to explode this into individual parts. So I have a command over here called explode, and it will explode it into individual surfaces. Great, so I'm going to pick explode, and now when I pick on it, you can see that the gumball treats each of those as separate surfaces. And at the same time, auto seaplane is changing the seaplane to that object. And that is super powerful because it takes something that required a command, a seaplane command, to one pick. Okay, so if I go to solid and pick cylinder, and I draw a cylinder right now, you can see it's perpendicular to that surface. And if I draw a cylinder here, it's perpendicular to that surface. Okay, so that's auto seaplane working super hard. And if I pick on the planar curve, it goes back to the top view. So what if I wanted to pick on a surface, but the surface was part of a poly surface? It turns out you can, but you need something called subobject selection. And if you hold down Shift and Control and you pick on a surface, then the surface responds to the auto seaplane as if it were an individual surface. Shift Control and pick. Okay, so now if I right click up here and go to cylinder, I'm drawing the cylinder on that side. And if I escape and pick here and then draw the cylinder, I'm drawing on that side. Okay, now you can name these. So if you think you're going to be using them frequently, if you right click on the panel, you can open up a panel called named seaplanes, and the named seaplane panel has our typical seaplanes like world top, world front, but I can take this one and name it, and I can call it box 1. Okay, so there's box 1, and I can name this one box 2, and this will become part of the model. Okay, so now if I double click on top, I can go to box 1 and box 2. Okay, so just a different way to work. I'm going to turn off auto seaplane. Hopefully you and Gumball are really good friends right now, and I'm going to keep Gumball on. There's another thing that I wanted to show you here that I find is really helpful, and that is cursor tooltips. Okay, so let's go over here at the top view, And I hope you're navigating okay. I haven't seen any questions about navigation. So the right mouse button pans, except for in the perspective view. To pan, you need your shift key. The wheel mouse zooms in all of the viewports. And then you have some special commands up here, like zoom selected. And zoom selected zooms that object in the current viewport. You can also right click to zoom selected in all viewports. And then if you right click, you can zoom extents in all viewports. There's one option that I like to use that I'll show you. Once you turn it on, Rhino will remember it. It's under View in Options. So go to Options and pick on Linked Viewports. And when you link a viewport, then any zooming you do in a parallel viewport is going to be done in all viewports. So as I'm zooming on that potato chip surface, you can see that in all the parallel viewports, I see it. Okay, in a very large model, that can get maybe confusing and not what you want to do, but in a smaller model, it's pretty helpful, I think. So I usually have that turned on. So when you're drawing curves, so if I go over here and I pick a polyline curve and I start the polyline curve, I can really pick anywhere unless I turn ortho on. And when I turn ortho on, I'm restricted to whatever ortho is set to. And in this case, we have 15 degrees, which is quite a lot. You might want some other feedback here as to what angle you're actually picking on. And the other option that you have when drawing a polyline, instead of picking points, you may want to lock in a distance. So if I type in 20, I'm restricting the cursor here to 20 units, and that might be what I want, or I may want to type in 40. So I can see how far that point is going to be located from the last point. So there's 40. How about 100? Pick. How about 20? Pick. How about 100? Pick. How about 40? Pick. Okay, so you get the idea. That's called distance constraining. And distance constraining means that when you're in a command that's expecting a point, you can lock on to the angle with ortho and just type in a distance, 20. 20. But you do need that pick to actually accept that distance. It's still a little difficult because I don't get any feedback as to how far I'm going to draw that line segment. So if I go to Options and down to Modeling Aids, there's an option under Modeling Aids called Cursor Tooltips. And it turns out that in addition to O-snaps, I can get the distance, the relative point and angle, in addition to the O-snap. And I think this is enough. Distance, relative point angle, let's pick OK. Okay, so let's draw another line. And if I go to Layer and make another layer current, then I'll be drawing on that layer. Okay, so look what happens with the tooltip. It's showing me how far I'm going. And if I turn on Grid Snap, then I can lock into the Grid Snap, restricting the first point, second point, third point according to the grid. Now, that's a little bit A little bit tedious. So if I know I want to go 40 units, I type in 40 and I pick it. If I know I want to go 65 units, I type in 65 and pick. Okay. So these, I feel, all work together to help you accurately input your line work. Okay. And there is a close. The other thing that I think is important after you've drawn a polyline is to be able to verify these dimensions. And one option you have is to go up to Analyze and Distance, but you will need your O-snaps over here, and you can find out the distance from here to here. Okay, or maybe in this case, it's more helpful to know this. So if you want to verify dimensions, you can do that under Analyze with the Distance command. Now, the reason why I don't use distance is under drafting, I like to create a linear dimension, and that's how I verify dimensions. And if something is wrong, I can change the geometry and it will update the dimensions. Now, it is a little bit hard to read. So if I go to Options and Styles and go to the default style, which is current, let's scale them up by 3. And that's the model space scale only. So I can see them here a lot better. Let's say that we want this dimension to be 40. I'm going to turn on the control points, and I'm going to move these two control points a -20. Okay, so now that dimension turns to 40. And let's say that I want this dimension, and I don't really need control points. They're just a little hard to see under my curve. So I'll just know they're there. I can make them bigger in the display mode. Let's say here, I want this to be 60, so I'll type in -5. And I do that all day long with architectural floor plans. Okay, so I not only see the dimension, but I'm able to correct it, and the dimension updates with that new distance. Okay, there's some other specialty geometry here, and then we're going to go on. First, I want to go on to homework. And what I did here when I changed default to 3, the text actually got bigger too, so I can bring that back to what it was. I could change them to a different style so they're not affected by that default dimension style, and that can happen very quickly by using cell text. I could also do an override. So if I did cell text and I look over here under properties, the model space scale is 2. I can override that with a scale of 1. So it's still following everything else about the annotation style, but the scale. So we do have meshes and support meshes in Rhino. We create them, we make them. One way to create a mesh is to come up here under mesh, and there are mesh primitives. So I can create a mesh box. I don't really know why you would want to do that, but you can. Maybe a mesh sphere might be a little more popular. You can also take a NURBS object and type in mesh, and you can mesh that object. And of course, there are settings for density, but that's another way that you can create a mesh. You can import meshes from other applications like DWG, DXF. You can download meshes from 3D Warehouse or Turbo Squid, and Rhino will import and support those. Now, Rhino is not a mesh modeler. It's a NURBS modeler with some mesh capabilities. So we do have some mesh Booleans. Those who use Form Z or Modo are usually severely disappointed with Rhino. And that's because Rhino really tries to be good at a lot of things, but not good at everything. So, but one thing that it is really good at is sub-D surfaces. So we have sub-D in Rhino, um, starting with Rhino 7, so Rhino 8, of course. And one thing you'll notice, and let me just set up this example for you. If I pick the control points on the mesh and I go to edit it, see how those faces are not continuous with the adjacent face. So they have no continuity with the adjacent face. All I have is this protrusion now of 6 other faces out of that mesh sphere. Okay, that's how meshes behave. NURBS objects are very different, and I'm just holding down the Shift key here to show you how they edit. The NURBS objects remain internally continuous. So as I change the location of its control points, the object is morphed. So I can do that with control points. I can also do that with faces, and I can hold down Shift and Control, and I can get multiple faces selected. Let's say these two, and I can pull them out. I can scale them by holding the Shift key down. Okay, so that's the difference between mesh and our sub-D surface. Okay, and of course, our sphere is a closed surface. It has very few control points. It is degree 2, and if you try to edit the control point, depending on which control point you use, it's either going to be smooth or it's going to create a crease. So half of them will be smooth and half will create a crease. And that's what we know about our degree 2 curves as well. Okay. So there are a lot of tutorials on sub-D, and if you go out to the Rhino Learn page, you'll find sub-D modeling. It's probably the best place to start. So if the whole reason why you are here in the Getting Started is for sub-D, I can tell you Rhino 7, many Getting Starteds were for sub-D. You can also, from the Getting Started tutorial library, you can, most of the ones I have to say that Kyle does are use sub-D, or I should say a lot of them. So there's his ones from Rhino 7. We usually try to say in the title that sub-D is being used. Maybe we can put AI to use here in the future to search through all of these and come up with lists that use sub-D. Like right here, the last one he did in December was the sub-D lounge chair. Okay, there's a lot out there on sub-D, but not everything is appropriate for sub-D. So we also have to know the other parts of Rhino and other geometries that it creates. Okay, you can save this if you haven't done that already. I'll just call it what, because it was what is Rhino. And let's open up the Canoe Start that hopefully you downloaded. This is the model that has the curves in that we will be building the canoe from. If you're watching the video, you can download the model set from the description. So there's a zip file, download it and unzip it into a folder, and you can see my folder here is just called the Canoe. So have that, if you haven't downloaded it, go get it, and then open the file called Canoe Start. The curves in this file are actually edited and are going to work very well with the Loft command. Now, the Loft command has a restriction that you can only loft between curves that are all open or all closed. So these curves are all open, so we meet that criteria. The other bit of editing that has occurred here is that the curves are all the same degree and have the same point count. So by doing this, you will not have to rebuild the loft while it is being created. So if I go up to Edit and Rebuild, and I select these curves and go over here to Properties, I'll enter here for rebuild. The point count is 6 and the degree is 5. Now, you don't have to continue with the rebuild command. If you just want to use it for information, then you can cancel. You will find this command up under Curve Tools, and it's the rebuild. It's the working man here, so you can select those and see that command dialog box as well. So I'll pick cancel. The other way that you can look at these details about these curves is to go to Properties and down to Details, and it tells us that they're all open, degree 5, and have 6 control points. So they all are ready to be lofted into the hull surface. So if I go to Layer, the layers that we have here are hull inside, hull outside, and hull curve. So if you don't have hull inside and outside, you can add them by picking new layer. And I want to make the hull outside layer the current layer, and then let's go ahead with our loft. First of all, if I go to Surface, you could see the Loft command here. You can also go up to Surface and down to Loft. And when it asks to select curves, if I pick on this end of the curve and that end, this end, that end, watch what happens. So we get that bow tie effect as the beginning of the curve is being switched here, and the surface actually ends up twisting to go through that curve in the proper direction. So of course that isn't what we want, so I'll pick cancel. When you do your loft command, it's recommended that you either do a window to select everything in the command, or do a window before taking the command, and the pre-selection with the loft command actually works very well. And you can see that the hull surface is coming along pretty nicely. The options that we have here are loose, and loose is like doing a control points curve. Tight is similar to doing an interpolated points curve. Straight sections is similar to doing a polyline, and then normal is probably most similar to that interpolated points curve, and that's what we're going to use. Notice that there is a rebuild and refit option that will refit higher than the tolerance of the file, but we're not going to use those, just normal, and pick OK. Okay, so we've got our hull surface, and if we go to options, and I'll go back to standard here, and options, let's go to units, and in this file the units are inches with 1/100th of a unit, and this is consistent with the template called large objects inches. Now you'll also see that the layout is in inches, and the layout unit represents the unit that you buy your paper in. So if you're doing an imperial model, whether it's inches or feet, you will probably be setting up your layout and hopefully set up your layout with inches, because that's how you buy your paper. If you are doing metric and you use millimeters, centimeters, meters, your layout unit should be in millimeters, because again, if you go to buy printer paper and you're in the UK, you will buy it in millimeters, not meters. So it's really important that we follow these conventions. Rhino isn't going to hold you to it, but if you expect to scale your detail at a commonly used scale, it's going to be very difficult unless you limit your layout unit to inches for imperial and millimeters for metric. Okay, so if that's we didn't change anything, so we'll just go ahead and pick cancel. So if I go over here to the layers, I no longer need the hull curve, so I'll go ahead and turn that layer off. Now I can turn it off globally, so it's off everywhere, or just turn it off in the model. And I'm going to choose globally so those curves are not visible from any of the layouts that we're going to create. Okay, so the next step here is to mirror this surface, and it is one surface. When we mirror it and create the mirrored copy of that surface, we will join them together into a poly surface. So up under transform and mirror, I'll pick on the ends of that surface. So I have quite a few object snaps on here. I probably only have on these typically. So I want to pick at the end of that surface, and if you can trust that if you mirror over the x-axis that you will be able to join these together, then you could go ahead and do that with the mirror command. The mirror command offers x-axis. If you're not quite sure, then using the object snaps is probably the safest option. Okay, so let's join this together and let's test and see if essentially the canoe will hold water, or if you place the canoe in a pond, that water wouldn't be coming in this seam. So let's check the edge condition here, and that will be done under Analyze, Edge Tools, and Show Edges. So we have the option to show all edges and naked edges, and we have 5 edges and 2 naked edges. So let's go ahead and zoom in on the naked edges, and it looks like it's just the 2 outside edges. So that's acceptable. We know those are open. So let's go ahead and close that edge analysis down. So now we have to offset this into the inside or the interior. Another thing that I have going here, if you go to display modes, I have shaded set to color back faces, and the back face color I have set is cyan. So you can go ahead and do that. And what that lets us see visually is what is the positive normal direction without having to go to the direction command. So I can always go to direction, but if the front and the back faces are shading in the same color, I can't really tell what is the normal without going to the direction command. So I like to do this. The two colors that I typically don't use for layers are yellow, because that's Rhino's highlight color, and then cyan because I find that it doesn't broadcast well or record well. So I will use either of those for the back face color. And in this case, I've chosen cyan. So let's go up to surface and offset surface, and we'll pick on this surface. And one option that we have is to flip the direction on the inside with flip all. We can make it solid equal yes, and the distance is 1. And I can verify down here that the unit of the model is inches, so that 1 means 1 inch. So let's go ahead and enter to accept that. And it looks pretty good until we get down to the edges here, and then things start to really, or the point, and then things start to really get messed up. So that tells us that using the offset with solid isn't going to be the approach that we can take here. So let's go ahead and undo that. And this time, let's do an offset, flip all to bring the direction to the inside, but leave solid equals no. Okay? And that means we're going to have to clean up those surfaces. So what I can do here in layer is make the hull inside the current layer and turn off the hull outside. Now, currently I have them both on hull outside, so I'm going to have to put this on hull inside. So one way to do that is to use the layer control down here and select hull inside. Okay, so now when I turn hull outside off, and I can just turn model off, you can see that we have a couple surfaces to trim. So one option that I have is to take trim, and I've got it here off of my standard toolbar, and pick the poly surface as the cutting objects, and then pick what I want to go away. And I want that to go away, and I want that to go away. But because it is associated together, we're going to have to explode it first. And here's the explode command, and then we'll take trim. Select cutting objects. I'll pick this one, and pick object to trim. I'll pick that one. And then I'll go down to the other side here and pick this one. And I don't think we have anything out here in the middle to pick, but we're also going to have to make sure that edge is going to close. Okay, let's do that again. Select cutting objects, enter, pick object to trim. I'll pick here and down here, and it looks like we're ready to join these together. Looks a lot better than it did originally. So let's go to join, pick on this side of the hull, this side of the hull, and let's test the edge condition. So up under Analyze, Edges, Show Edges, we have 6 naked edges, which is different than what we saw with the outside hull. So we have some issues to work out here. And the first thing I think we'll try to do is loft between these surfaces. So let's see if we can fix up these edges that are open. And the interesting thing is the loft command actually tried to create a surface, but it didn't get it joined. So let's try and do that. So join, pick here, and pick here. And let's look at the edge condition. And that side, I think, looks okay. We're going to have to test it, but let's do this one now. So we have this sliver that Loft tried to create but couldn't join it to the hull. And it probably had to do because of how tangent those surfaces were. So let's see what we have here. Okay, so edge analysis, add object, and we have 8 naked edges. So let's go ahead and zoom. And it looks like we have these points here. I don't know if this is something that we need to worry about, but this down here looks like it definitely is. So at this point, one of the options that we have is to fill in that area with a sphere and just fill in that hole. Another option that we have is to trim back the hulls and then loft between them and hopefully bring them together without a naked edge. So it is a little bit tedious when you get to this point. It looks like we are super close, but we still have this opening that we have to account for. So if I pick here, and even trying to zoom in to see the naked edge is very very difficult. So I'm going to go ahead and explode this, and I'm going to select both of these surfaces and I'm going to lock them, and then I'll do a window around everything else, and then we'll hit delete. Okay, so let's go ahead and unlock those. It might be possible if we do our own loft to get this to fit a little bit better to close up that opening. So I think that's something pretty easy that we can try to loft between here and here, and then join it together. And then if this doesn't get us what we were looking for, then we're going to have to trim back the hulls before lofting between them. But I think since this is kind of a low-hanging option, that if we try it first, there's a chance we may have some success. So I'll join those together, and let's just see what the edge analysis has to offer. And actually, I think that was a very good choice, because we now only have 2 naked edges, which are the edges on the outside. So I like to say here that we're golden. So we're ready to continue with the modeling of the hull. So I'll go ahead and close edge condition down, and let's turn on the outside again, and we need to now loft between the inside and the outside. And compared to what we just did, this is pretty straightforward. Surface, loft from here to here, pick OK, and then loft again from here to here. Enter, pick OK. And now we'll join those to the hull. So I'll pick the outside hull, join, and then I'll pick the two lofted surfaces. And we also have to join the inside surface, so let's go ahead and get that inside surface as well. And that's a very good sign, because as we pick the inside surface, it immediately discontinues the command. And that's because if I go here to properties, it is a closed poly surface. So we have the hull, and we want to now model the top rail, and to do a pipe around the top rail, I can start by extracting the edge curve. So I'll go up to curve from objects, and I will duplicate the edge, and I want the outside, not the inside, so we'll pick the outside and the outside. Okay, now watch what happens here if I decide to pipe between these two curves, and I can right click here and select objects and not join them. It's pretty clear what you'll see here in a moment. So if I do pipe radius of 1, it doesn't clean up the ends. Okay, so you get that kind of butterfly look here. So let's undo that and first join those curves together and then pipe. And watch what happens here with this method. We'll go ahead and enter. So by joining the curves, the pipe does this really beautiful miter, and we have the bumper now on the Canoe. The last or the next thing we're going to do are the seats for the Canoe. So I'll turn on the seat curve layer, which is globally off, and I'm going to extrude them into seats. Now don't worry, they're going to be too big, but we'll trim them down here in a moment. So let's go ahead and make the seat layer current, and right click on seat curves and select objects. I'm sure there's other ways to do that. There's only 2 objects, but we took advantage of our layer control there. Solid, extrude planar curve straight, and I'll just bring those out beyond the hull surface. Okay, so the reason why I didn't give the seats a distance was that we have a curved degree 3 freeform surface here that we're trying to follow. So given this a straight edge wouldn't mean a clean intersection. So we're going to use the Boolean command to help us make sure that those seats contour to the inside edge. So let's go ahead up to solid, and the solid menu has a command called extract surface, and I want to extract the inside of the hull with copy. So I'll pick here and here, and now I have a copy of that hull surface. I can join it together, and I can place it on another layer. Let's say the top rail layer, just because and actually it's probably not a good layer. Let's pick another one. Probably just the maybe layer 0, 2 would be fine. And that came in from the template. Default would be okay too. So I know we probably all have the default layer. Okay, so I want to turn off the hull layer, and I want to turn off the top rail layer. Now what might be smarter here is if I put the top rail under hull, and that way when I turn the hull off and on, the top rail is going to go with it. Okay, let's take a look at Boolean. So up under solid and Boolean difference, I want to difference the hull from these two solids. The surfaces or polysurface to subtract with is this surface here. Great. And then enter, and we immediately have our contoured seats, which means I can turn off the seat curve layer and I can turn back on the hull layer. So you can see that that was a pretty significant task, but we were very quickly able to accomplish it with the Boolean difference. And if you look back here with F2, the options that I had set were delete inputs, yes, and delete cutters, yes. So make sure if your Boolean difference didn't turn out exactly like mine, that you check those options in the Boolean difference. Okay, let's take a look at rendered, and we can see that we have some materials here that are already assigned, but I want to go over how to do that. So I'm going to pick these 3 layers here and set them back to default. Okay, because this is typically what you would see when you go to render. There are no materials assigned. So there's one option that we have. When you go to shaded mode, you can see that the layers have colors. There is a command called synchronized render colors. The problem is that the materials that this create aren't plastic-like, so they don't have that shiny illuminance that plastic will give us. So if I use that, I'll get the color, but it will be like a really flat color. So what I like to do here is go to top rail and pick the plus and select the plastic template, and then just pick the red color, and then I could type in a red plastic here. There may already be a plastic in this file, so I'll just be very specific here. It's red plastic. Okay, now that did all of these, so I'm going to go to the outside hull, and let's create another plastic, and I can do that with the template or by making this unique, and by making it unique it has the plastic settings, but I want to change this to green plastic, and I'll pick the dark green and pick OK. Okay, and let's go down to seats. And seats, I don't want to use a plastic. I actually want to use wood. So I'll pick plus, import from material library, and wood. And then we can pick on whatever wood here we want the seat to have. Here's a dark polished wood. Or you could go with a lighter, like a chestnut. I don't know, I think I'm feeling like I want the lighter wood today. Pick OK, and now let's put that viewport in either ray trace mode with my GeForce RTX card. That's a real-time rendering. It does a really nice job there, and when it's done rendering I can capture it using the menu from the viewport title and come down to capture to clipboard or file. Okay, so that's one option that gives you all of the features of the rendering, the refraction, and the shadows. There's another option to go into render display mode, which will look a little bit different. Sometimes it's just a little cleaner, and you can capture that as well. Now there's one more option for render, and that's to actually pick the render command. And when you do that, it's probably most similar to the ray trace mode, so you can also apply some denoisers and plugins as well. And here you save the image when it's done rendering. The wood texture here, sometimes I look at that and I want that to be 90 degrees to where it is. So one of the options that I have is to edit that wood texture, and the wood texture has an option in it called rotation. I can pick here, and if I double click, I can type in 90, and let's pick OK, OK again, and now you can see that texture is going across the long grain of the seat. Probably more realistic for how that seat would be cut. Okay, the last thing I want to do is I want the inside of the hull to have a different render color. So I've kept this as a solid so I can 3D print it. So Rhino offers the option to sub-object select and change that material to white. And I do that by holding down Shift and Control. So I'm selecting these two surfaces, and instead of following the layer, I'm going to assign their material directly to these objects or these surfaces in this case. So I'll go to Properties, and I'll go to the Material page, and it says Use Layer Material, and I'm going to do a white plastic. Now if you don't have a white plastic, you can pick on the plus and go to plastic and make a white plastic. But if you have white plastic, you can go ahead and select it. And that's super cool because this is still a closed poly surface, but we've just given that object a render color that is set only to those surfaces as part of the poly surface. And there is a command to remove the assigned render assigned materials to layer, and we can there is a command to remove the per face colors, and if you type in face, you'll see it, remove per face colors. You could also type in remove, and you could pick on this object and remove those per face colors, and they would be set back to the layer. And I can also undo that to bring them back. So sometimes you may not know where the render colors are coming from, and that's where this command can be very helpful to get everything set back to by layer before you continue with the render color assignment. So we are ready to go to the next part of this exercise. And if I wanted the bumper to show up in the wood material, all I'd have to do is change it to the seats. So that's the power of having material by layer. Let's go ahead and bring in the logo. That's one of the, and I haven't saved yet, so it's probably a really good idea to save. And I have another model that I want to combine with this one, and it's called the Rhino logo. So if I grab that model and I drag and drop it on top of the Rhino model, it says I can insert it, import it, attach it as a linked block, or I can open it. Now I don't want to open it. Insert and import are very close. What I like about insert is it offers me a group option. Okay. Sure, we can do a little bit more with the materials. So we're going to do that here. As I insert the Rhino logo, I can keep it as embedded geometry, or I can link to it. I'll keep link and I'll bring it in as a group so it won't be associated together as a block. And as you bring it in, you can see it's really tiny. But using your Gumball, if you hold down the Shift key, you can scale it. And it's also coming in vertical to the construction plane, which we're going to solve with our Gumball coming up here. And the layer that comes in with this geometry is called sub D. And I want to put it on the logo layer. So I'll just pick it and change it to the logo layer. And we got to the material by picking on the little circle that is under material. And if I put this on the logo layer, I'm going to pick here. And from the material dialog, you can select materials that are already in the model. You can see that turns red, which isn't bad. But one of the options you have is to pick the plus and to go to the top option, import from material library. And this is what the Rhino material library looks like. There's a couple thousand materials. You want to spend maybe a lunch break someday going through them, but there are metals, and I can pick from polished and gold. Now, if you don't see the preview, you can pick over here and select like medium icons or large icons. This is just your Windows Explorer. Now I'll pick here, pick OK. And now I guess I made the top rail gold. I will reset that to red plastic, and let's go to the logo layer down here. And this is the one I want to be gold, but I already have gold in the model, so there's not much else to do, but get this oriented on a surface that represents this shape. And as you're learning Rhino, you'll probably read or hear that internally surfaces in Rhino are kept as rectangles. And if you want to see what that rectangle looks like, Rhino offers a command called create UV curve. So I'm going to make this shaded again, and we'll rotate the logo to be flat either now or later. But we're going to place the logo on the surface that represents this hull surface in UV space. So let's go. I'll probably just make the hull layer current and go to curve, down to from objects, and create UV curve. right here. Create UV curve. I'll pick on the outside of the hull, and then it creates the curves that represent that surface in UV space. Now, why that's important is because when we do flow along surface, it's going to want a base surface that represents the surface in UV space, and then the target surface, and then of course what we want to orient on that surface or flow along that surface. Okay, but it's not a surface yet. It's still, and I'll probably throw it on default layer, it's still a set of curves, and to make a surface, you can go to surface from planar curves. Okay, now it's a surface. But one thing that I find helpful is to know what the bottom of the surface is. And it's very hard to tell because they're both showing the top face and the bottom face are the same color. If you go to your display mode, and that's that little TV looking icon, and you scroll to the bottom, there's something called color back faces, which is part of your display mode. And if you put the check mark in there, I like making my back faces something bright like cyan. So the top is green, the bottom is cyan. And if I look at the direction command, that coincides. So direction is positive, direction is pointing up, negative direction is pointing down. And again, that's going to be important. When I went to rotate my poor Rhino logo, I didn't rotate it very well, so I'll go ahead and finish that. And I want the logo to be half above the surface and half below, and that will determine the depth. So if you wanted to eventually union this to the hub, it would be important to make sure that it intersected. Okay. Time to flow. We've got all three things. We've got the base surface, we've got the target surface, and we have the objects that we want to flow. And they're also grouped for easy selection. So up under transform, we'll do flow along surface, select the objects to flow. It's a group, so they select as one. You can make groups over here. The base surface is this, I'll pick in this corner and then in this corner up here, okay? Now, I can see that it's morphed, but it's not the right size, it's not in the right location, and to make matters worse, I didn't use history. So if I use history, there'll be a relationship between these objects and the ones that I flowed. And I could move them and they would change on this surface. So I'm going to delete that, and we're going to do this again with Rhino history enabled. And history by default has to be enabled for each command. There is an expert mode where you can enable it, and you can do that later, but it's important to kind of understand what history does and be able to choose it. So if I take transform, flow along surface, select the objects to flow. Okay, before I exit this command, I want to make sure that down here record history is on. So I get a little bit of flexibility here. And let's pick the base surface and the target surface. Okay. Now, granted, it may not be where I want it, but take a look at what happens. As I move this now, it reflows it or updates that surface. So if I flow using history, I don't really have to flow again. Okay. Unless I want this on the other side. So if I bring this down, maybe I want another one in the middle. I'll copy it, and then we'll do flow again with history on, pick the base surface, pick the target surface. There we go. So now we have 2 of these Rhino logos. The other text thing I want to do here is text. So I'll make the Rhino logo layer current, and up under solid, we're going to do solid text, not annotation text. So under solid, pick text, and if you want to type in rhinoceros 8, let's give it a height of 10 and a thickness of 1. And some fonts can't remain closed, so just be a little careful when you're picking fonts. If it doesn't close, you just have to find another one that will. Let's see if that one remains closed. I'll pick here. Is this grouped together? No, I think there was an option there to group it, but I didn't take it, so I'll go ahead and group it now. And let's take a look at the depth, and I want to bring that down. So there's part of it that will be flowed, but will be inside that whole surface, and we are ready to flow. So one more flow, and then we'll add a layout. And if you think that's too big, you can scale it down even before we get started. With a uniform scale, it will change the depth. So let's go ahead and flow along surface, pick objects to flow, pick the base surface, and pick the target surface. Now, I didn't do that with history, so that means if I wanted to change the size or location, I would have to do it again. So I'm going to repeat it with history on, pick the base surface, pick the target surface, and there we have it. So here we can scoot it over, and it will update on the hull. And again, hold the Shift key down and it will scale uniformly. There we go. Okay, now when I go back into rendered mode, I will see that on in the gold material. There it is. Okay. And all I have to do with these is either turn off the layer or hide them. So I'm going to just hide them, and this I don't need anymore because I have the surface. And you can save this. To add this to a layout, pick on the plus and pick new layout. And our title block is D size, and I want third angle projection for viewports, and we have a landscape orientation. All of those things are what we need for this sheet. Pick OK. And although it looks like we have quite a bit of work to do here, it's actually going to go very quickly. I have details, and I usually like to put them on a detail layer. Unfortunately, though, I didn't make it active when I added the layout, so they're just on the current layer. The other thing I like to do is use the gumballs to separate these guys out so they aren't touching. And you can also use your control points on the detail to change the size of the detail. Okay, let's start with this one. Double click on it. Notice that only one detail can be active at one time, and you can change the orientation, construction plane. You can add dimensions. You can change this display mode to rendered. And then the other details, I actually would like to be at a scale. So let's start with this one. Either of these two, I want to look at what happens when they're 1 to 12. And I get really close here, 1 to 12. I may have to stretch the details by just a little bit. I'll turn on the control points and I can grab all of these at the same time and bring them over. There's also a command to synchronize all the parallel viewports. It will work here in the layout as well. It's called Synchronize Views, and you can see how all the views are now 1 to 12 and 1 to 12. Perfect. Okay, so at this point, we can put this one in shaded, or we can put all of these in shaded by being on the layout and selecting shaded from properties. Okay, so that's new in Rhino 8. And if you use the Gumball to adjust the size of the detail, it will always remain centered. But if you use the control points, you'll have to do the top and the bottom. Great. Okay. So we'll add a couple dimensions here. The display mode that we have set to cyan is showing up on the rendered view. We may just want to go, or on the shaded view, we may want to just go to rendered there. And at this point, let's go ahead and add the title block, and then we will add a few dimensions. The only other thing I want to do here before I forget is lock the viewports. And if you lock the viewports, then you can double click on them, add dimensions. You won't be able to change their display magnification, which is really important as we're getting into the next part. So let's add the title block. I'll make the title block layer current. And the title block, like I showed earlier, I can just drag and drop it. The title block is made for a layout, so it'll only work on a layout. If you drag it into model space, you'll get the curves, but you won't get the text. I'm going to insert it as a block. This time I'm going to keep it as a block instance. And I'll bring it down here. And we'll talk about the title block. There are some fields on it that we can update, like sheet number, and give you an idea how text fields work. But for right now, I want to make the dimension layer current and add a few dimensions. So the first thing I need to know is what annotation style is current. And if I go up here to annotation style, there's one called decimal inch, and there's one called feet and inch. So I want to go to decimal inch, and I want to make it the default. So with the decimal inch, there's an option under length units to turn on an alternate unit and to also show feet and inches. So I can do both units at the same time. Okay, so I'll create one dimension in the model. So I'll double click and I'll go to linear dimension, and using my endpoint OSNAP, I'll pick on the end of the canoe. And as I bring that dimension up, you can see the precision and the display is being provided by the annotation style. So let's create another one here on the layout. And if you want, you can drag this down to the end. The dimensions, we have a chain and a baseline option. So I can pick here. I could maybe get a little closer. Let's go from the end to maybe a little zoom will help us out. This is a surface, so looking for properties of the surface like a knot or a vertex can be really helpful when dimensioning. Also turning on curves. Okay, so there's our dimension to the seat, and then I can do continue equals yes and go to the next seat. And I won't close it off by going to the end, but I did want to show you that you can also place a dimension, and I must have got to one of the, I'll pick here and then go over to the other side. I can also create a dimension on the layout. So that is an option. It not only looks the same, but because we're using OSnaps, it scales. So a lot of times people ask, well, where should I create my dimensions? And the answer is you can create them either place, but if you don't want them visible in the model, you can create them on the layout. If you want them visible on other layouts and other details, then you do want to create them in the model. I'm noticing this one is skewed a little bit. Set view to right. But I can't do that unless I unlock this. So let's unlock it and just make sure we get our view set to right. Okay. That looks a little better. I can lock it again and place dimensions in other details as well. There is a volume dimension. So if you wanted to dimension something with area or volume, you can also do that under drafting. And let's say other annotations, we pick area, and I'll pick on this surface. This would be helpful for figuring out how much paint or how much plastic would be required, fiberglass. I'll pick this point, and that is and it's hard to see in the 3D model, so this might be a reason to go up here to drafting. And in drafting, there's a toolbar for our display order command. So keep objects on top. Here it is right here. Display order, bring things to the front. There we go. Okay, it usually does a little bit better job of that. If you pick on this dimension, you can add area of hull, just so whoever's looking at this kind of knows what it is. The unit is in the current unit, although we could add feet if we put in here inch cubed. But if we wanted to add one for square feet, we could do that by picking FX and going to volume, select object, pick on the hull, pick square feet, and I know what I did. I picked volume, not area. Let me get, and it's, let's get to area. all the way at the top, kids. Okay, there we go. We'll pick that and change the unit to feet. Okay, pick OK. And again, a little bit of description here might help. Feet square cubed. Okay. Okay. Correction. There we go. I keep thinking of volume, but we're not doing volume, we're doing area. So that should do an okay job. And we can also create a dimension from one overall dimension. And when you're dimensioning to surfaces, it is a little bit challenging. Sometimes I like to extract the ISO curve and then dimension to that. All of these are not what we want to see in this viewport. So we have an option to hide these in the detail. If we weren't going to do dimensions here, we could also just turn off that layer in the detail. So if I go down here to detail on, I can turn it off, and then any overall dimensions I want to do here, if I do them on the layout, it won't be visible. Up here is probably the most common place that we want to turn these off in the viewport and leave them only on here in the, and here's another option here. We may want to pull that to display order, bring to front, because that one was falling below the model. Now, any other text you want to create can be here on the layout to describe the various views, and we can make the text layer current and go up to drafting text block. This is not solid text. This is 2D text. It's taking on the dimension style, and we can override the height of the style, give it its own larger height. We can also make it bold and underline it. We can add another piece of text for the different views, or we can just copy it, but it does remember our last settings. So if you're quickly kind of trying to go through and add some labels, you don't have to reset them. We can also use the align command to align these, and let's go back to the defaults here of the style, and let's do scale. And the scale will be a function of the detail. So if I pick detail scale, select the detail, I can pick how I want it to be displayed, 1 to 12 or 1 inch equals a foot, and pick OK. So that scale is tied into the scale of the detail, and if we change the scale of the detail, it will update. But in order to show you that, I have to unlock it, and let's say I type in 1 to 6. You can see where it changed there, and then 12. Okay, we'll lock it again, and we would have to do that for each detail right now. I can copy that, but the text is linked to the detail. So if this one changes, they're all going to change. In real life, I would link each of them to their own detail by going FX, detail scale, select the detail, pick the formatting, pick OK. Okay, now I did wipe out scale, so I'll put that back. Great. Okay, last thing to do here is just look at a couple text fields in association to the title block. You can also, if you haven't yet, open up your layout panel and we can copy this layout 2 or 3 times, whatever we need. I can duplicate it and then duplicate it another time. We could rename this one page 2. The idea here is that page 1 will only have the rendered view. So I'll keep this. Keep this, drag it over here, delete that. Sorry. Okay, we'll bring that down. And so this one will be rendered view. We can use properties to change that. And the scale is not to scale. So that one's pretty easy. Okay, so that's page 1, and page 2 has these images. And let's go ahead and work on the title block. Now, the title block doesn't have a sheet number, but we can take care of that pretty quickly if you double click and you add a piece of text from drafting text block FX. I want to add the page number. So page number of each layout, and I'll pick OK, and we'll add it here. Maybe make it a little bit bigger. And then this one, let's go ahead and copy it, and then we'll copy it again back here. Okay, this one is just going to say of and probably be a little smaller. Okay, just so, and you'll see how this works here kind of magically in a little bit. This one is not page number. It's actually the total number of pages. Pick OK, and that is 2. So let's look at what happened to this title block. It's now 1 of 2, and this is 2 of 2. So what happens if we go to the layout panel and we duplicate this layout? And I'll delete these 2 because I'm going to cut a section through these views. So this will be our section sheet. And what happens here? Look what automatically happened, 3 of 3. And this changed to 3 of 3. So those are the power of having text fields. And I didn't pre-define these for you, so you could do it. Let's look at 2 more here, project and contents. This shows you document user text and layout user text. So each of those does a good job of that. Let's go to options and down to document user text and add a field for project. And I'm going to call it project 1 and put in the value of the Rhino Canoe design. Okay, I think that's right, although it is pretty small there. We can come back and correct it. That'll give us another chance to look at the field. So if I double click on this and I go over here, the text field was project. I could put it in a 1 and that would use the text field that we defined, or if I do it from scratch, I pick FX, go to Document User Text, and pick on the project field. We have a few little corrections to make. Okay, so that's the power of text field. So now if I go up here and I change Canoe design, it'll show up fixed out here. Okay. Now the other thing that I did, and I blame high resolution on this, I'll get rid of that asterisk, and now I have to get rid of it here out of the project name. And then it will be back to normal. Okay, I can add many project fields, addresses, client name, anything that relates to the project. Now, as far as contents that is dependent upon this layout, that I have to add to the layout itself. So if I add a contents field to the layout, and let's say I add rendered view as the value, then I can add a field that will use that contents. And to change the contents, all I have to do is change it in that tab. So if I go here to Layout User Text and I add this, I can add it to all of them here in a moment. Pick OK. Great. And there is rendered view. Okay. But if you look at the other layouts, this key is only available on this layout. So we need to copy the key and value with the right click, and then right click again to paste key and value to all layouts. And that's how you get them populated across your layouts. Now this is orthographic views, so I'll type that in, and then you see that changes. And if I go to this layout that I copied, I can call it page 3. And let's go to Layout User Text, and these will be section views. Okay, so everybody has its own contents. All of these layouts have their own contents, and this field reflects that. Now there are some other fields like date. You can see here that date changes. You could add designer, drafter, approved, check by also, because this might be different on each layout. Those are also appropriate for the contents of the layout, probably more so than document user text. Okay, that's looking pretty good. We're almost ready to print. The last thing that I wanted you to do here is cut some sections through our Canoe. And let's just do the section command. I like to put the sections on their own layer just to keep track of everything. So you can do that for management, and you can add a section up here under drafting sections and create right there. Okay, so I'm going to enter to accept all and then create a section that goes through the middle of the Canoe. Okay, and you can see the direction that it's pointed And then I'm going to rotate and go to the y-axis and create one more section. And you can see that in the top view, they're both being applied. But if you pick on them and go to Properties, you can uncheck the top view. And if you want to see them, let's say in the perspective view, you could turn them on. But we're going to actually add them to layout views. This one, I want to flip the direction. And that one, I don't know yet. It might be okay, or we flip the direction. We'll be able to decide that later when we see them in the views. This one, in Layout Space, page 3, I want to add it to the front view. And this one, I want to add it to Layout Space, page 3, the right view. Okay? And let's see what happens. So let's go over to page 3. And the view that we're looking at is the section view now of the front view. So if I go here to rendered, you can see maybe a little bit better what we're sectioning through. Okay. You can also apply a hatch to the sections. So we can do that in the layer. So if I change this to rendered, if I want to see a section style here through the bumper, we can do that on layer. And we'll go to the top rail. And if you scroll down here, you'll see section style. And I'm going to use a grid pattern. The pattern color will be yellow. I'll scale the pattern by 2. And the boundary I'll scale by 5. Pick OK. Great. And I should make that boundary maybe a little bit different color. So let's go back to custom and change the color to black. There we go. Okay, so we're getting that section through the solid, which is that geometry. Now let's do hull and hull outside. I'll pick on the section style, which is none right now, and the hatch, section hatch objects, or a section open objects with this hatch. So let's pick another hatch, put in a rotation angle at 45. We'll put in a background color of cyan and maybe go to magenta and 5 as the boundary. Okay. The seat would be another, they're solid, so that would be another good opportunity here to create a hatch. 45, scale of 2, background color, or this is the color, sorry, blue. And background could be a color like yellow, and the boundary could be, let's just leave it black, pick OK. And right now, if you look at our perspective view here, the seat is not being cut, but watch what happens when I drag this through the seat. Let's go back to page 3. Okay, and now it's being cut through that geometry. And now we see both of those seats. And if I scroll over here, let's see, I'm going to double click on the detail, pick the seat and put it on the sublayer. The configuration that we did, we don't have section styles. So the configuration of the hatch that I did previously has to be done for this layer, which is not seat curves, which I did by mistake. It's this one here, and let's make it cyan and black. Let's see if we get something good now. There we go. Okay, so now we have a section through those seats. Okay, this is ready to go to the printer. There have been some really great improvements in Rhino 8 for printing. If you go down here under View, if you pick all layouts, you can uncheck the ones that you don't want to print. Rhino 7 didn't have this. You can also print to separate sheets, and it will come up with a naming convention. So by default, you're going to be printing to one PDF, but if you didn't want that, you could print to separate sheets. And the last thing that I'm going to show you, save after opening. After you print, it will open the PDF in your PDF reader. We'll give it a moment here, and pretty soon, when it finishes, we will see it opening up in the PDF printer, which of course is over on my other screen, but I'll drag it over here so that you can see it. Okay, there's our model, our layouts, our details, everything that we had wanted to do. Thanks for watching and hopefully doing this tutorial.